The Knicks go into Detroit tonight with a chance to close their first round series in 6 games. I'm going to tell you why going to double big finally for extended minutes might be the way to close this series out right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. This episode is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land for all your favorite Knicks coverage, including some great written coverage, some great podcasts, all kinds of good stuff. And today I will be talking about Game 6. What can the Knicks do to potentially win this game? Clearly could not quite pull it out in Game 5, and things look pretty disjointed, all things considered. It was kind of a miracle that they were as in it as they were. I think more of a testament to the defense than the offense. So going to talk about ways that they could potentially fix the offense, which involves just going to lineups that make more sense, possibly getting Mikal Bridges more involved, and also OG Anunoby, who has been quietly kind of one of the bellwethers of this series and whether things are going well for the Knicks or not. But first, I want to thank you all for making Locked On Knicks first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit the auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode, especially during the postseason where sometimes we're coming to you guys 5, 6, 7 times a week. Want to make sure you never miss an episode there. So let's get right into it. The Knicks obviously lose Game 5 on their home floor. Things did not look fantastic. Timeout management, I guess, maybe should be thing number one to address going into Game 6, just to make sure you don't end up with another debacle where Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart are both sitting at the scorer's table for a minute and a half waiting to check in. But I think one of the main things I wanted to look into is what hasn't been working for the Knicks this series. I feel like we're now at 5 games in. I mean, everything is small sample size theater. If this was 5 games into the regular season, we might be saying, hey, take all this with a grain of salt. I'll say the same with playoff numbers, although I will also add the caveat that, things should be a little more realized at this point. So whatever trends we see in the playoffs should hopefully be indicative of what things actually are, or are more likely to be indicative of what things actually are, considering these guys have been playing together for the whole year. So stop me if you've heard this one before. The Knicks starting lineup is playing the most possessions together of any lineup in the NBA right now in the postseason. They are currently at 230 possessions together. That's Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, and Karl-Anthony Towns. In those 230 possessions together, they are at minus 4.7 points per 100 possessions. So they are 5 points in the bad with their starting lineup that plays the most minutes together right now. In case you were wondering, that's not good. That's very, very bad. If this was a regular season team that was playing 5 points worse per 100 with their starting lineup, you'd probably assume that they were a 10 seed, maybe, possibly a lottery team. It's not great. It's not good. You don't want to be putting up negative points with your starting lineup. It's not good business. And therefore you would think, one, how the heck are the Knicks ahead in the series right now? And for one thing, it's the fact that they had that 21-point run in the first game, which was with a totally wacko lineup compared to what they normally play, with Cam Payne and Jalen Brunson sharing the floor together, Mitchell Robinson out there. Like, there's a lot of data to suggest that, like, Mitch has been maybe the most impactful player this series so far. So more Mitch is probably a good thing, but swapping out one of Josh Hart or Mikal Bridges if one of them is not feeling it. Now, the data right now is kind of crazy on Mikal and Josh Hart in terms of what their on-off numbers are, which I'll get into in a little bit. So that's coming up when I talk more just about Mikal. But let's for now talk about the two big lineup, which I think has been a huge positive, and mostly just Mitch has been a huge positive so far in these playoffs. So here are just some of the better lineups that have played more possessions for the Knicks here. I think this is their second most played lineup is Jalen Brunson, Deuce McBride, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, Mitchell Robinson in 38 possessions together, again, juxtaposed against the 230 that the starting lineups played together. In 38 possessions together, that grouping is plus 25.5 points per 100 possessions better. The last two lineups have played just under 20 possessions together, but Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Mitchell Robinson plus 8.2 points per 100 possessions. And Cam Payne, Deuce McBride, Mikal Bridges, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Mitch are a plus 9.7 points per 100 possessions better together. Lineups with Cat and Mitch overall, and there's been a couple that have not worked as well, a few that have worked phenomenally well, but overall, lineups with Karl-Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson this postseason, in whatever minutes they've gotten, have been a plus 1.4. With those two plus Jalen Brunson, they've overall been a plus 8.8. Now, the only problem with this is that we've only seen 24 possessions of this postseason. So 24 possessions with Brunson sharing the floor with Cat and Mitch. They've been 9 points better per 100 possessions than their opponent, the Detroit Pistons. Why would you not go to it more? This is the constant question with Tibbs, right? So it's kind of the crux of what's wrong with the Tibbs experience. The team's having to like learn on the fly how to play their best lineups in the playoffs when these guys were basically locked into this 3 seed. Like, I mean, there was a chance they could have ended up the 4 seed. Maybe they would have been better off ending up the 4 seed at this point. But that they were essentially locked into their seeding in the playoffs and on autopilot, even without Jalen Brunson, for the better part of the last month of the season, and barely tried any of this stuff, particularly in the last few games when Jalen Brunson was active, when he was getting up to his 65 game marker and all that stuff, and getting back from the ankle injury. They could have very easily tried Brunson, Cat, and Mitch. They could have even started that lineup for one game just for kicks and seen how it worked. And they just have not done a ton of it. And as a result, it feels like we're not seeing a ton of where Cat and Mitch are like put in a position to consciously work together. They're more just sort of existing in the same spaces. And like, even just on their natural talent alone, it works. Like there is something that works about this lineup, and I think it's largely that for the most part, when Cat is out there with those lineups, Tobias Harris is on the floor. I think that Cat has shown that he can both beat Tobias on defense at times and can keep up with Tobias on when Cat's on defense, keep up with him and contest him well and keep him from getting to his spots without getting into foul trouble. Then you have Mitch back there as the last line of defense. And then you have both of them for getting rebounds, which Cat has been, he was at one point the most prolific rebounder in the NBA this season. It's become a little less so as time has gone on. So I don't know. It feels like this is something that the Knicks should be going to more, and yet they're just not. They're consistently like getting away from it. And Tibbs is still sort of pulling the Cat for Mitch 1-for-1 swap more often than I think he should be. If Mitch truly doesn't have a minutes restriction anymore, and you're at this point where I don't want to call this a must-win game in game 6. Obviously, the only must-win once they went up 3-1 is game 7, right? That's the only game that truly becomes a must-win at that point. But this game, I think they should definitely be trying to pull out all the stops, because I would not want to give Detroit the momentum going back into the Garden, where Detroit has frankly been outplaying the Knicks in the Garden in this series, and the Knicks have been outplaying Detroit on their home floor at the Little Caesars Pizza Palace. It's like I think the Knicks should probably try to like close this thing out in this game and go to the lineups that have been working best for them. Maybe we even see like a 4-5 pick and roll with Cat and Mitch together, which that worked for Cat and Gobert in Minnesota to pretty great effect. And it's not something that we've really seen with the Knicks at all. But that's something that could potentially tilt the Pistons. That's a thing where you could get Jalen Duren in foul trouble again, where you could get Paul Reed in foul trouble potentially. And make them in a position sort of like what the Knicks were in last game, where the two viable centers that they have could potentially both be in foul trouble if you start leveraging pick and roll more. And that's to say nothing of like maybe just run some Jalen Brunson and Mitch and Jalen Brunson and Cat pick and rolls more. But that seems to be out of the question at this point. But either way, I think lineups wise, some things need to change here. I want to talk a little more about Payne and Brunson as well. I think that look, Payne has been imperfect this series, but the guy did win you game one. I think there's something to be said for potentially trying that lineup out again and seeing if you can make it work. If Payne is out there knowing that he has a little more of a role. But I'll talk about that in just a moment. Get into some Mikal Bridges numbers, get into some OG Anunoby numbers, and just all in all, go through a few other statistical things that I've seen throughout the series that I think could be worth addressing for the Knicks in this game 6. But first, I want to let you know about our friends over at Fire TV. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? You can turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with the Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles, including EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty, as easily as you stream your favorite shows. And I think it's pretty sick being able to play games in any room. It used to be I had to just go to the room where my Xbox was. But now, if I'm in the bedroom and I want to play some games, I just bring a controller with me and I can play them before I go to bed. Or if I want to play, in a different room, I could even, in theory, if maybe I'll get a TV in my kitchen and then I can be playing like Oblivion remastered while I'm making dinner. That sounds pretty cool. That's kind of the cool thing about the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K experience with Xbox included, is that now you can play games anywhere. You don't need the big old Xbox Series X everywhere anymore. You can just play them wherever you can bring a controller and have a Fire TV stick plugged in. So head to amazon.com/Fire TV locked on to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K second gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max first and second gen, and Fire TV Cube third gen. All right, folks, let's keep looking into some of the statistical trends of what's been working and not working for the Knicks so far in this postseason. And again, I must stress, I feel like the main thing that's not working is the starting lineup just is not playing well together in this series. So I think whatever you can do to mix up personnel, inject a little life into things. That's what's been working for the Knicks in this series. Like the 21-point run in game one was with an oddball lineup. Some of the biggest runs the Knicks have gone on have been with Mitchell Robinson on the floor or with Mitch and Cat on the floor. Like they need to just kind of lean into what's working, which is, I think, mitigating the Pistons rebounding, because Jalen Duren, to his credit, has been a really good rebounder in this series. I think that he swung a lot of possessions by just being there, not being boxed out. I mean, the amount of times that the Knicks have forced a miss in this series, and then Jalen Duren has gotten, or someone else. I mean, it's not all Duren. Sometimes it's been Asar Thompson or someone else. But the amount of times that a Piston has been able to clean up a miss and go up and get an easy putback because all the Knicks' attention was on stopping the shot and there was no last line of rebounding defense there. It's been a backbreaker for them. We've seen it pop up a number of times, including late in game 5. So they need to do whatever they can to mitigate that. And also, I think, to get more creative looks in the offense. Now, could that be by utilizing Cam Payne and Jalen Brunson together again? They only have 7 minutes together in this series so far, and per NBA stats, this is insane. They have a 104.3 net rating together in those 7 minutes. So, look, you can attribute a lot of that probably to that 21-0 run. They were both on the floor for a good part of that. So, hey, maybe that's skewing all the data, but it worked for a game. And there is a way that you can figure this offense out where it makes a lot of sense to have those two out there. You don't necessarily want to have them out there for a ton of time together, because I do think that you run the risk of having a bit of a defensive liability with having those two. However, if you put them out there, if it's like Brunson, Payne, OG, Cat, and Mitch, I think that that is a lineup that it's jumbo on the inside and then smaller on the outside. But you have Campaign out there then, who's good at setting the table, who's really good at running a pick and roll, who could get Mitch involved that way, who could get Cat involved that way, who could kick out to Jalen Brunson for a spot up three, which it is the one thing that I will always bring up is Jalen Brunson is a phenomenal spot up shooter. And like, I know some people were like, in YouTube comments were being like, did he just compare Jalen Brunson to Steph Curry? Yeah, I did, because the thing that Jalen Brunson and Steph Curry have in common is that they're both really good with the ball in their hands and really good without the ball in their hands. And that can't be said for every on-ball point guard in the NBA. Like, a lot of point guards that are good at scoring are only good at doing it with the ball in their hands. Jalen Brunson is not one of those guys. He's great at relocating. He's great at catch and shoot. He shoots better on catch and shoot. Like, if you look at all the numbers since he's been a Knick, no matter whether it's the regular season, the postseason, everything, he shoots like 6 to 7% better on spot ups than he does on pull ups. And that's not to say that he's not an amazing pull up shooter. Like, he's one of the best pull up shooters in the entire NBA. No doubt. I'm not trying to take that away from him, but he shoots like consistently 42, 43% from three when he catches and shoots. And the Knicks consistently, it seems like, try not to get him those opportunities, and instead are just like, let's tire this guy out and have him bring the ball down every single play. I mean, we saw last game. I mean, it nearly, well, you could argue it cost the Knicks the game. The fact that they did not have anything more creative drawn up than having Jalen Brunson bring the ball down. The Pistons were fronting him, and he was having to run into guys over and over. Then he gets tackled by Dennis Schroeder, tweaks his ankle, has to exit the game for a minute, and then can't check back in for the last minute and a half. It's like, I think that they need to really like, or well, okay, sorry. Actually, the previous one was the previous game prior to that when he got tackled. But either way, doesn't matter. We're seeing consistently he's getting bumped at the level, and having the ball out of his hands could be useful. Campaign is, I think, one of the only guys on the team, other than maybe Josh Hart, that I would trust to bring the ball down the floor and set the offense up. But I think that he's a much better pick and roll initiator than a guy like Hart. I think that he's better at doing that than Mikal Bridges, or like anyone else that you could task with being like a secondary ball, or Deuce McBride also. Anyone else you could task to be the second ball handler with Jalen Brunson out there. I think Campaign is the most capable. He's also really great at running in transition. I think that if you have Brunson out there with him, if you have OG out there, especially, OG is like the king of playing really good defense, but then having a really quick switch of knowing when the play is done and getting down the other end, and being ready for an outlet pass to potentially get a big dunk in transition or whatever. He's done that time after time after time. I think it's worth experimenting with throwing that lineup out there again. you know, don't do it in crunch time. You don't have to do it in the second half. Give it 5 minutes in the first half, in the second quarter or something. Put Campaign out there and have him, run the shift with Deuce McBride a little bit, but leave him out there when Jalen Brunson comes back in. See if you can make something work with it. But I don't think it's going to happen because Tibbs' ideal is just Jalen Brunson bringing the ball down the floor and running into, all kinds of trouble every single time. But whatever. I don't know. And maybe it's worth trying. I think a 104 net rating, even if it's only in 7 minutes, pretty solid. I don't know. Maybe worth trying again, but just another one of those things that we saw in one game that did really well. And then Tibbs, to his credit, let it cook in that game, but hasn't really given it a fair shot since. I think those two can work together. I think especially if you've seen now proof of concept that a jumbo front line of OG, Cat and Mitch can work together, you can afford to be a little small in the backcourt because you know that you have protection on the inside. And Mitch is and always will be one of the biggest deterrents in the NBA around the rim. Teams behave entirely differently if he's waiting at the rim versus if anyone else is waiting at the rim on the Knicks right now. And if anyone else other than short of like maybe Rudy Gobert is waiting around the rim, like there are very few guys other than Mitch in the NBA that provoke the reaction that he does, where teams straight up will avoid the paint on his behalf. So I think of all the players that you could test that Brunson and Payne lineup with, have Mitch out there, have Cat out there for spacing, have OG out there for spacing as well, and his ability to get out and transition. Maybe you can make another, I don't know about 21-0 run happen, but maybe a little 10-0 run in one quarter in this game that gives you a little breathing room, and then you can go back to one of the other lineups or whatever. But I think that's worth looking into. But two of the guys that I think also really need to get going. Well, one guy really needs to get going. The other guy has gotten going in some games and has really swung it for the Knicks, and the Knicks need to prioritize that. Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and I'll touch on Josh Hart a little bit too. So Wingstop in the next segment when we get back in to Locked On Knicks. All right, so let's talk Wingstop. Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, a little bit of Josh Hart here. So Mikal and Josh Hart have been the most crazy juxtaposition in this series in terms of their impact. And Mikal is at, I had to double check this. I had to check this on two sources to see if this is for real. And it is. I honestly cannot believe it, because I test alone. I feel like Mikal Bridges has missed some shots, which sucks. But all in all, has been playing really good defense on Cade Cunningham. And I feel like, at least on one end of the floor, has been additive enough that I thought that he would be closer to a net neutral than he has been. But this is crazy. Mikal is currently, and this is per Cleaning the Glass and per Basketball Reference. I checked two different sources because places calculate their like offensive ratings slightly differently and whatever. And sometimes you see like a pretty meaty swing between the two. Like it'll be like, like 5, 6, 7 points, difference between Basketball Reference and Cleaning the Glass based off how they calculate these numbers. But Mikal Bridges per Cleaning the Glass is a minus 41.2 points per 100 possessions and on off for the Knicks right now in the playoffs. I checked that on Basketball Reference. They had him at a minus 41.7 net rating on off, rather, with the Knicks right now in the playoffs. Basically what that's saying is that for every 100 possessions that are played with Mikal off the floor versus Mikal on the floor, the Knicks are, there's a 41.2 point swing between when he's on the floor versus off the floor. That is insanity to me. So that either tells me, one, he shouldn't be on the floor, but because the eye test shows, and I mean, Gavin and I have both seen this, a lot of people that I know and respect have seen this, like he's playing great defense on Cade Cunningham. So what that says to me is that the offense is failing both themselves and him when he's on the floor. So how do you change that? I don't know how to do it exactly, but I think, I don't watch the film 8 times, I'm not Tom Thibodeau, but I think you need to make a point to get Mikal involved on offense, whether that's, I mean, 3-point shooting has been rough. Like I'm not going to say that all this isn't his fault, because this number was, I mean, when I was looking for a number that explains a lot of that, I think this is one that starts to do it. He's shooting 16.7% on 2.4 threes per game per NBA stats. The NBA stats will qualify as wide open. Now they're tracking data as far as tracking where defenders are and whether shots are wide open or not is pretty imperfect. My buddy Prez from the Strickland has done a lot of work on that and made lots of tweet threads about it and stuff about how the overall the data on NBA stats as far as like wide open versus whatever, like 4 to 6 feet defender, whatever. If you go back and actually watch the plays, a lot of times you look and you're like, oh, they said he had 4 to 6 feet of space, but he was actually wide open, or they said he was wide open, but there was a defender much closer, whatever. It's a little imperfect. That said, taking that data for what it's worth, he's not shooting great on open threes. That's got to change, because they have been generating open threes for him, And it seems like the only ones he's making are the movement threes while he's practically falling out of bounds going into the corner. Doesn't make any sense to me. But either way, 3-point shooting, I mean, I will petition for certain guys on the team to get more threes all day, but he's now reaching Josh Hart territory where the Pistons are just letting him be from three because they're not super respecting him from there. So maybe get away from that a little bit. My thought would be maybe get him in his zone where he likes to cook in the mid range and give him a few more opportunities. Like I think that we saw during the time when Brunson was out, Mikal was initiating a lot and was finding his way to the mid range pretty consistently, and getting up, getting up a good amount of mid range shots, getting a lot of his points from there, and all in all, like that was a good area of the floor for him. He's currently shooting mid range shots 5% less of the time in the playoffs than he was during the regular season. That sort of runs opposite of how things normally go in the postseason. Typically, you see the mid range start to become more of a weapon in the postseason because it's where you know teams don't defend as much by design, and it's where you know in the playoffs when the 3-point defense tightens up, when the interior defense tightens up, and things are allowed to be more physical, the mid range is where guys can find an open shot. And Mikal has done that a number of times, and he's been hitting them at a pretty good clip. He's only shooting 1% worse on all mid-range shots right now. I, for whatever reason, didn't write the number down, but if I'm remembering correctly, it was 51% on all mid-range shots during the regular season, 50% during the playoffs right now, which is good. I mean, that's 50% anywhere from the floor is a solid shot. And it runs better compared to his 30, I think he's shooting 32% overall from three right now in the playoffs. So that's a little bit better. Like it's something that he's more comfortable with and something that'll keep him more locked in. And then maybe if he starts making those mid-range shots too, it's cliche, but they say sometimes you just got to see him go in. Maybe that's worth checking into and seeing if you can get him going from mid-range and then let that ignite the rest of his game a little bit. And maybe then he starts making the open threes that he's being having generated for him. Because 2.5 3-pointers, again, if this number is accurate, if he's having 2.5 3-pointers per game generated for him that are wide open, if he starts making those, then that's potential huge momentum shifters. Those are ones that can potentially push a lead out. Those are ones that can spark a comeback. Those are big shots. Wide open threes are a shot that you need to make in the NBA, especially if you're offered one in the playoffs. And he's just not making a lot of them right now. So you got to find a way to get him in a rhythm because, again, he's playing good defense on Cade, but the team is obviously playing worse with him out there right now because they can't get him going on offense. And so you got to get him going on both ends of the floor because I think to be the best version of yourself, you have to have that good defense on Cade. Now, you get a lot of that from OG too, but I think that having the ability to have those two guys switch off on him throughout the game is important because you can't. I don't think you can trust, you can trust them maybe, but I don't think it's fair to put on a defender to be like, hey, guard the other team's best player for literally the entire game. That's going to wear even the best defenders out. So they need to find a way to get Mikal going on offense so then they can keep reaping the benefits of what he gives them on defense. I should note Josh Hart, for as bad as Mikal Bridges has been with the 41.2 negative on off, Josh Hart has the highest on off on the team. Again, I forgot to write this number down, but I think it was plus 22 points better with him on the floor than off the floor per 100 possessions. So maybe the answer is just more Josh Hart. Although I think that for spacing purposes, a Mikal Bridges that is shooting well or even shooting well from mid-range is probably offering you a little more than Josh Hart in terms of offensive spacing. So we'll see how that all gets played. Obviously, Josh Hart is going to get his minutes and he's going to get lots of them. It's Tom Thibodeau. It's Josh Hart. We know how Tibbs feels about him. But my last point that I just want to quickly touch on is to get OG going. I think his worst game of the series was game 4 when things were called the loosest, when he was able to just be fouled with reckless abandon by Detroit without much pushback from the refs. I think that I mean, I think that both sides would say that they got fouled plenty in that game. And, I think that OG was one of the guys that got taken the most out of his rhythm by how loose that game was being called. He didn't really get much from the free throw line. He certainly didn't score much overall just because he was not able to finish through all that contact. So we'll see, how this game is called. But I think that he had one of his best games in game 5 because the game was called tighter and he was able to like actually get inside, actually have room to operate, actually like go up for layups without having his arms like pulled away from his body. And I think you need to go for more of that. I think that, we've seen at different points in the season, like when OG is going on offense, makes the Knicks pretty damn tough to deal with because if Detroit has to start spending all that effort trying to stop OG from scoring, that means that Cat and Brunson are that much more open, that much more able to score. Um, it especially for Brunson, that's huge because if the defense is allowed to key in on him as much as they have been at certain times in the series, like he's going to have another bad game like he had in game 5. And that can't happen. Like you need to be able to utilize the other players to make Jalen Brunson's life easier so that he can do what he does down the stretch of the game and potentially seal this thing for you in 6. So we'll see how it goes. I think that's all I got to say on this one. Hopefully the Knicks are able to pull this thing out tonight because going back to MSG where Detroit has played, like I said, they've honestly played better than the Knicks in MSG, I think, during this postseason for the most part. You don't want to necessarily give them all that momentum and all that hope as a young, hungry team to come in and potentially upset you on your own floor on game 7. So hopefully they're able to make these adjustments, come through. And I give Tibbs credit. He probably coached his 2 best games in Detroit as well. So hopefully, I guess the Knicks are just road warriors, which is unfortunate when you're a higher seed, I guess. But hopefully they're able to close it out in Detroit tonight and avoid a game 7. But we'll be here for you with a recap. And of course, for the potential game 7 recap, if there needs to be one on Locked On Knicks. But until next time, thank you all for listening. And we'll talk to you soon. Peace out, everybody.